Thank you, everyone. I'd like to call to order the Environmental Matters Committee meeting for February 15th, 2018. You can take a roll call, right? Can I have a roll call? I do it? Oh. Alderman Arnett?
Aye.
Alderwoman Tierney?
Aye.
All right, thank you. And so first on the agenda, I'd like to call Joanna Ogburn, I believe last name is, right? With the Conservancy Board. You can come and sit at the table, yeah. She's not on, do I need to amend the agenda? She's not on that. She's kind of coupled with the Environmental Commission.
Thank you. Hey, good afternoon. Thank you guys very much for letting me go first. I really appreciate that. Again, I'm Joanna Ogburn. I'm the chair of the Annapolis Conservancy Board, and I just wanted to share with you one of our thoughts related to what Diane, I think Kate are going to be talking about later in their recommendations for priorities for the city to take on related to environmental matters. So for the Annapolis Conservancy Board, one of the ideas we really support is the idea of updating the city's parks, recreation, and open space plan. And part of the reason for that is within the next 6 months or so, we're hoping to take on our own process to identify some new potential voluntary conservation easements around the city, places that would help to connect ongoing trail systems, bike paths, also places that would be particularly important as pocket parks, and that would be important natural areas on their own. So we're looking to do this process for identifying new places, and what would be a fantastic complement is to have the city's resources and updating that plan to see how we can complement each other and get the work done together. Any questions? Oh, yeah.
Mr. Chair, first of all, Tanika, can you get us a copy of that report? That even predates me on the council, and
Oh, yeah.
I think a good start would be to get that and review it. I like the idea of this, and first things first, I think we ought to know what it says, and then we'd want to hear more about what you think should be done to update it.
Mr. Chairman, I can try and get a hold of it. I think the report that, there's kind of two things. The report that Joanna's referring to is the Recreation and Parks
Right.
plan, and it's like 2003,
Well,
2002.
I think.
It's pretty dusty, so I can try and get a hold of that for you. I know Recreation and Parks directors over the years have asked for some support to try and get that plan updated. But the other thing that's probably really interesting for this group to know is that the Conservancy Board has worked with Sean Butler, our GIS coordinator, and taken a list of parameters that would be land that would be the best suited or priorities for conservation areas, and created an overlay of where those properties are. And it might be good if you guys wanted to see that, so we could give you a sense of what was the acre or more?
I think we started with properties that were an acre or more in size, but we weren't set to that. So if there are properties that are smaller, but that would be wonderful connections for bike paths and trails, we absolutely wanted to look at that too. So, but there are a number of parameters, as Maria was mentioning, things like do they make connections for greenways or bike paths, and some other things there too we could share with you guys.
Ms. Ogburn, can you give a briefing for those who may not be aware of the role that the Conservancy
Sure,
Board
absolutely, I'd be
provides?
happy to. Sorry I didn't do that to start off with. So the Annapolis Conservancy Board, we manage and monitor all of the city's conservation easements. So any property that's had an easement placed on it for open space, we monitor it regularly, make sure it's following the language in the deed. We also work with landowners that are interested in voluntarily putting easements on their property. And right now we're in a great position and a good part of our process to identify some new voluntary landowners to work with. And we actually just met with one a couple weeks ago. So we're getting to a point where we're able to be much more proactive and have criteria and work with the GIS system to identify places that would really connect up some of these important assets the city has. Does that answer your question?
Yeah,
Mr.
yes,
Chairman?
thank
Okay,
you.
Great.
So as it turns out, this dovetails nicely with other initiatives going on, specifically in my ward, but I think around the city, which is access to water.
Oh, great.
And we're trying to save the remaining street-in parks so people can actually put their toe in the water.
Wonderful.
They've been gobbled up in various ways over time, and I have one that's happening right now a half a block away from me. But also, we're looking for open space for dog parks.
Okay.
Since Annapolis is such a built environment, it's hard to find spaces that are big enough, appropriate, and can allow, and away from people. So people have wanted to use Turner Park in Eastport for dogs, and I can understand why they want to do it, but dog people tend to show up at 6 o'clock in the morning, and they talk and the dogs talk and the neighbors don't sleep. So
I'm
I think
familiar
there's-
with that,
yeah,
location.
so I think there's a lot of potential synergy here in the different objectives. So getting this thing, and of course there's a beautiful space by Pip Moyer that is open space and I think is not fully put to use, but we need to make sure we protect the environment there first and then talk about other uses.
Oh, great. Now, those are things we would love to work with the council and the city staff with as well, to find those ideal locations. Yeah.
So is your contact information online on the city's website?
I don't think mine is. I think it's Maria's probably.
Okay.
But
Shouldn't the
Mine
Conservancy
is.
Board-
But I don't know that actual contact information
I
for
don't-
any of the boards and commission members are on.
Yeah, usually
On
it's
the
just
city's
the
website.
liaison's
I
contact
think it's just the
information.
liaison.
Yeah, so I actually have all the boards and commissions
Hey,
right here. I
oh,
wonder
well,
if
we'll
it's on
find
the
out.
list.
There's a lot of stuff in there.
Yeah, I know, it's a goodie bag. No.
You never know.
You're not on our list of boards and commissions, and you need to get on here.
Wow.
And then we will
Okay.
have a contact for you. This is a good document that Will Rao put
That's
together.
what he-
That,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, so I'm gonna share it with everybody. I've been editing it a little bit, but, anyway, yeah, of course, Jay Baldwin did that for years and years in my ward, and,
that's
Ellen Moyer was a
Yes.
person that really was very friendly towards that, so, it does have a strong home in Eastport, but I think throughout the city.
No,
Yes,
it's been great.
any support you need from the council, please let us, myself, know. And
Great.
so I think it's great that you're looking to put together, this is kind of like a greenway plan. The county has a greenway plan,
That's right.
and if there's, I know you're volunteers, but if there's anything we can do to help get that done before next year's comprehensive plan, because if we can
Oh,
get that
right.
incorporated in that plan, then it'll trickle down, it'll give those forests, those areas, more potential to be protected by using the Forest Conservation Act, because it'll be incorporated into a planning document.
Great.
But yeah,
No,
so
that'd
if
be
there's anything I
wonderful.
can do,
Yeah.
please get in touch.
Well, I really appreciate your support, and that sounds like wonderful timing, so we will definitely shoot to get that done before the comprehensive planning process starts up again. Yeah.
Alderwoman Tierney?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You read my mind to prepare for this meeting and to knowing that we were going to talk about different objectives and strategies. I reread the comprehensive plan, and I just wanted to take total advantage of you and ask you sort of for a report card on what this says, if you don't mind. This is policy 2. Protect and restore environmentally sensitive areas and other natural resources within the city. 2.4, through the Annapolis Conservancy Board, the city should obtain conservation easements to meet the objective of protecting the city's natural resources, generally in environmentally sensitive areas. Specifically, conservation easements should connect open space where possible. The city should consider limiting rear lot easements, establishing incentives for developers to remove invasive species during the initial grading process, and acquiring fee simple dedications for small areas and minor subdivisions. What would be your report card on that, or how would you embellish that for the next, comprehensive plan?
Sure.
How did we do?
How do we do? I think the city's done a tremendous job at getting some new easements added the last couple of years. I think there've been 2 or 3 easements. There's a new property that's just been acquired, or is in process of being acquired, the Schubert property. That's another nice natural resource area. So I think there've been some wonderful acquisitions and easements the last few years. Our board, hey, Meg, I think maybe the last year and a half just got back up to full capacity, is that about? So we were in a position to make sure we had everything in order. We've monitored all the properties again, got a good kind of sense of what we've got in the portfolio, and now we're at a great place to take advantage of the GIS resources, really take a comprehensive look at the city to see where those important sensitive natural areas are and connections to open space, as you mentioned, and identify some key places we'd like to work with landowners on. So I think we're in a nice point in our process and kind of taking a second look at everything.
Alderwoman, I might suggest, because there were about 6 different items in that one section, that maybe we see if we can put that on the agenda for the next Conservancy board meeting and maybe get something back to you about the board's feelings
Yes.
on each of those individual elements. You know, because some of them I think we've done pretty well at. Some, you know,
Yeah.
we might need your help for pathways to improve on. So,
Yeah,
because that had about 6 or 8 different things on it.
there were
Yeah,
a few.
and I think the comprehensive plan is ultimately, you know, the overall guiding document. We want to make ours look good.
No, thank you for bringing that up again. And as Maria said, I think a number of those points were in a good point. And then there are a couple of things you mentioned, the developer incentives and things along that line, that we haven't focused on as much, that maybe we need to consider as a board and come back to you guys. Yeah. Absolutely. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. We'll take a look at our next agenda.
And you said you do have full membership?
Yes.
You don't have any vacancies? Okay.
Yeah, no, we do. It's been wonderful.
And actually,
Yeah.
you are on the list.
Oh, phew.
These colors are so dark, I wasn't able to read.
We're hiding. Yeah. I'm glad to hear we're on the list.
Are there any other questions?
Thank you.
All right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
your
Thank you for your time and support. Yeah, take care.
Yeah, yeah. In the meantime, next on the agenda, I'll call Ms. Burkhart from Public Works to, we're going to jump up to the ordinance that we need to, the business before the committee. I want to just get that out of the way.
Good afternoon. Tora Burkhart, Water Sewer Program Manager for the city and engineer, Department of Public Works. So this is for water service for 3032 Arundel on the Bay Road, which is in the county. There is a little over an acre lot there now that actually does have an old water meter at the lot that is not currently in use. The property owner is asking to subdivide and has an application into the county for that, and would like to put 2 houses on the lot. So they would remove the existing meter and replace with 2 services. Since they are outside of the city, they're required to get approval from the council to get that additional service.
Okay. Thank you. Do we have any questions about this?
No, it's pretty straightforward. I have my usual complaint about the sufficiency of the fiscal impact note, but that's for finance, not... We are charging them the outside user rate, right?
Correct, for all usage. The connection itself and the capital facility fees remain the same
Right.
as for the city, but the usage itself is at the higher rate.
Yeah. So you said there's one existing structure with one
Right.
non-functioning
Right,
connection.
and the current structure, my understanding, is not in use
Yeah.
at this time. It's going to be torn down and 2 new,
2 new single-family homes.
right, correct.
Okay.
I would make a motion that we recommend approval to the city council.
A second? Any discussion?
This is 02-18?
Yes.
Yeah, have we received indemnification from the owner?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, that's, well, it's in the water service agreement. The water service agreement can't move forward until this board and the council votes on it. But they have agreed with the draft water service agreement, so they did not say they wouldn't indemnify the
Thank
city.
you. Sorry.
Sure.
Put a motion?
It's a discussion.
Oh,
If there's
okay.
anything else,
Thank you.
yeah. Okay. Well, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Something actually went quickly for us for a change.
I know.
Um,
I want to amend the lease.
yeah. Next on the agenda, I'd like to call up Mr. Director Gutwald to give the report for Plan and Zoning Development update.
Good afternoon, Pete Gutwald, the Director of Planning and Zoning, City of Annapolis. What I'll just do is, normally I talk about updates, but I'll just go through some of the major projects and highlight them and where they are, status. And I hope everybody had, this was uploaded to Granicus, so the spreadsheet is there for your perusal. It is also located on our website as well. We update our website with this and keep everybody abreast of the major projects going on through the city. I'll start off with 39 Hudson. That's the absolute fire protection warehouse and office space. The grading permit is imminent. Just a couple of outstanding comments or information that's being requested at this point in time, so the grading permit should be issued shortly. You see 122, that is the Starbucks that opened up. 285 or 141 West Street, that says under construction, but that's a number of residential units over non-residential near the Knighton Garage. That says under construction, but we have some outstanding easement issues that they're being ironed out, agreements that be ironed out, so it should be under construction anytime soon. 280.
Which one was that?
141 West. It's a public works easement because they're egressing into some of the right of way to do a footer.
Okay.
Wait,
Alderman
Pete.
Tierney?
Thank you,
Sure.
Mr. Chair. Just to get my bearings, is that the one, give me a point of reference there, is that the
Barber shop is
the
right
barber
there,
shop
yeah,
one?
mhm.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Barber shop one.
285 is up by the Circle where they use card lot, Compass Point Theater. Next to that, behind it actually. That is under agency review. That's 18 townhouses. We're waiting for a traffic study at this point in time. We requested a traffic study because there were some concerns with Bates Middle School with traffic coming in through Amos Garrett over there. So we're evaluating some of the stacking requirements and circulation. 1415 Forest Drive, that's the kitchen cabinet. That should be under construction. Last I checked, it wasn't actually under construction, but they should be moving forward. 1503 Forest Drive is right next to Pit Boys. That actually, they did do a footer there. We again had some issues with Spa Road property ownership there, getting that cleared up and cleaned up and getting that out the door, and that should be under construction anytime soon. The public library, we did get the final plat. That update to that is, it says is pending. That should have been recorded. If it's not, it's on its way to getting recorded, and they should be coming in with their revisions to their grading and building permits. So the Annapolis Public Library should be underway soon. All the other ones I think are, everybody notices that they're, Annapolis Towns is under construction, the Yacht Club is under construction. Bay Village should be under construction. I don't think it has actually began breaking ground, but everything's been issued there and approved. The Bowman housing for the veterans, I'm
Mr.
sorry?
Gold, I believe that project had a did they have a couple of extensions,
They had one extension, yes.
but they're getting closer to starting?
Yeah, there was some, they had some issues with the stormwater management. They wanted to redo some things with that. And actually, I guess they had some issues of the constructability of that, so it took them a while to get those construction documents together, I think is what was the outstanding issue, why they needed to get extended. But
Okay.
they did get extended, yeah.
Thank you.
Where was I? Bowman Housing for Veterans, the site design is approved. There has been no building permit submitted at this point in time, and that was a question and a concern. I mean, I think at a city council meeting about the parking, we haven't seen the building permit at this point in the staging and all that associated with that building, but we'll do our best to make sure they're not taking away parking spots in that area. Central Park is at 9 Elliott Road, if you know where that is, I guess that's Hilltop, around the corner. That's in a closed school district, actually, but we are continuing to do the reviews. There are still some outstanding property issues that I think the law department is trying to deal with, who owns what kind of thing.
That has to do with the railroad right-of-way. right?
Correct, yeah.
So there's still no resolution on that?
I think there is a game path, I think there's a disagreement as to who owns it and who doesn't, is what
Yeah,
they're,
so for
Seems to
my
be going around.
colleagues, yeah, it looks, I think the city believes it's city-owned, but which, as a side note, related to the Conservancy Board, that could be a key greenway connection with the park and
right.
various networks if the
So
city's
that is being taken into consideration, yeah. Chesapeake Grove at Bemby Beach, that's just, the plat is still outstanding in terms of reviewing that. I think we got all the property ownership identified with that. I think we got all the water and sewer issues identified with that. Mr. Moore next door is supposed to be hooked up to water and sewer. So everything, I think, is lined up in that direction. I think water and sewer is okay with it, what they've designed so far. But we still had some outstanding, awaiting comments for plats to be checked on that. There is still the outstanding issue of trees, but they have, their game path is to write a check, to do the fee in lieu.
Which fee in lieu would they fall
the-
under? Current?
That is $12.50 a tree. This is
Oh,
in the critical
that's
area.
right,
This is in
yeah.
the critical area, so it diverts back to, say, Title 17. So it's the last number I came up with was about $250,000 in fee in lieu, so from what they want to do. But they were still trying to find properties to mitigate on and that kind of stuff. But the last count we had was somewhere around $250,000 worth of trees, fees for the trees that they were taking out.
At some point, I might invite you back to talk more about the critical area, or Cynthia.
Sure.
And so any resolution on that in regards to I know the public, having some kind of public access to the water? It was an annexation agreement that they should explore having public water access.
There hasn't been any more other than
Okay.
expressing what you've expressed, forwarding that to them.
Because the plan, it looked like there was a trail that would connect with Back Creek going through the property, which would be a public trail. But then when it hits the water, it wasn't clear if they were going to make it a public easement essentially through to the dock area or not. 'Cause
Off the top of my head, those were individual lots, privately owned lots, at the end of by the water, but we'll double check.
but the pier and the pier is
Oh, the
questionable
pier,
who
okay, who
would have
owns
access to the pier.
it? Okay, I can look into that. East Port Sail Loft, Enclave at Spa, well under construction. Come on, let's keep moving.
Not so fast.
Yes,
So, I had a question from a constituent about where the commercial parking was for the Eastport Sail Loft. And in earlier iterations, there was underground parking, but it looks like that is now just for basement use. So are they just having on-street parking?
No, they have their parking is in the U part of you go underneath the building, but it's surface parking. It's not really, off the top of my head, it's not underground, but it's inside inside the building, if you will.
So it is underneath, on the first floor level?
Yeah, it's, and there might be another level, but yeah, it's, you
Okay.
you come in, but you go underneath the building, and then the parking is inside, and the building goes around.
All right, well, that's
Yeah.
what I thought, but
Yeah.
it doesn't, looking at the construction, I don't see that now.
Okay, well, I mean,
Yeah,
it's been a
well,
very interesting project, watching it getting constructed from a building code standpoint
yeah.
anyway, so.
Had something to do with special mix plan development permits, too.
It was the
Before we were paying
prefab building, the Lego theory of putting things together.
Okay.
But that's what was approved, so I don't know what the construction is looking like, but I'll double check on that.
Thank you. Do you need a pen to write that down?
I was like, I was gonna write stuff down, but I had a pen. I thought I had a pen. I don't know what happened to it. But anyways, I'm good. I can keep it. I'm good. I'm good. I'm good. What do I do with my pen? Anyways, moving right along. Lincoln Drive, that's out there by Chinkaman Round. That just recently was approved. They still have to, but that's not critical area or FCA. Lost at Eastport Landing, I'll keep going.
Nothing happening there,
Mediation.
literally.
Mannequin, that's the old MAFE building, 1750 Forest Drive. They're under construction. The reason why that had an FCP was because they connected the two buildings and it hit over the 40,000 square foot. That was kind of a weird one, but they did it anyways. So, and there's that access. And they also will be doing some grading to the access to South Cherry Grove Road. Parkside Preserve, enough said with that. Parole Place.
Parks are preserved. So nothing's happening with that?
Well, no, it's right now, actually, to be honest with you, the final things on that is that modifying some of the agreements, because now the 22 lots will now become part of the city. Some of the forest conservation or landscaping, I guess it was landscaping along the tree there, they needed to clarify some of the conditions within those agreements, because that'll just remain forest, and there will not be street trees along that section. And that was one off the top of my head that we were concerned, and the language that they were changing, I don't think Tom was very happy with, so we're working through some of the language to make sure what we're going to get is what we want, and that, we understand that they're not responsible for that area of that 22 lot that would remain forest. So there's been 2 or 3 agreements that they're tweaking right now to finalize all of that with Parkside Preserve. Okay. Parole Place, that is out off of West and Old Solomon's. That's a combination of properties right now. To update you on that, actually the forest stand delineation plan has been approved, and the plan development application was submitted sometime. It got caught in this tweener. I realize the judge's orders and all that kind of stuff with 035, but that did get, the application is in. We haven't done anything with it. It just was received by the department.
When was it received?
I want to say sometime in the middle of January. So it was, they had their community meeting. They did all that, and then this temporary restraining order came on time, is in effect right now.
Well,
So-
the consent decree is on.
Right, I'm sorry.
But it does raise an interesting issue, because the 035 was effective 1st of November. Now we have the consent order, so nothing can be done there. But when the consent order comes off, what is its status? Because if they applied in January, they're not grandfathered, if I understand the code correctly.
No, and they did do a community input meeting, and they're
Right.
planned development, so they'll be in front of the planning commission. All the not much changes for that one with or without 035, except for the community meeting, and they did do their community meeting.
Yeah.
So,
And so they don't have an approved forest conservation plan yet?
no, that would be not come until we start looking at the plans. So now forest conservation and the plan development will be reviewed simultaneously. Just the forest stand delineation, and that was submitted a while ago, but that's been approved.
And what are they
Can I just
proposing?
guess, how how does the courts suspending the rules, so to speak, affect the timed review for that?
That's what Alderman Arnett was asking, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I mean, that was
Well,
his point, but,
nothing can happen with the application. It's suspended. There's, what's the section 2130 or whatever that
Yeah, I
says
mean,
if
we-
something's in judicial review at any
stays all
level.
furtherance, right?
Right.
So, to me,
So it
it's
doesn't
just,
automatically become approved just because of the,
Can't be, no.
it can't be,
Yeah.
and it's, only, at this point, the status of the plan development is application received. We didn't even send it out for
Right.
agency review, so.
Right. I don't know why they entangled themselves, but that's fine.
I don't know either. I'm gonna jump down, I mean, I don't know if you have any questions with the other ones, but just keeping things moving. Rocky Gorge, an update,
Nope.
okay?
Because this has come up now, the Public Works Maintenance Facility, apparently that is in suspense.
That's my understanding, but from the department's review, they have all their approvals. All they need to do is pull permits.
Okay, but it might go a different direction,
In
right?
fact, the
So it would
grading
have to
permit
come-
was issued and the building permit was issued, so, yes, I understand that.
So they would have to come in.
So a permit's good for
all
60
new-
days technically, and they can ask for extensions.
Okay, all right. So what Finance directed yesterday, Finance Committee, is that if it's going to go in a different direction, not only do they have to reapply for something else, but we have to change the capital improvement program,
Right.
just like we'll have to change it if we're changing rebricking of Main Street. So things are getting more and more complicated.
Wouldn't want it any other way, would you?
No, we'd be out of a job. You just have a computer up here.
Alderman Tierney?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On that site, while we're waiting, or while it's put on hold, who is responsible for erosion control right now on that demoed site?
Well, I
Public
guess
Works.
Public Works, but whoever the contractor should have stabilized the site as part of the demolition permit. I mean, I would suspect that the contractor
Okay.
would be responsible for stabilizing the site
It's funny
as
you
part of
asked
the
that.
contract.
Asked that. I just sent an email to Public Works about an hour or so ago about that. Yeah, I could-
I'm getting old and have to
I'll
put
let
my
you know.
glasses on. Any more questions? Primrose report, Annapolis, I'm not, everything seems to be moving along there. I know Primrose Hill has had some stormwater management issues, as, runoff and sediment erosion control. I know Mr. Waters is on top of that and monitoring that regularly, so. Rocky Gorge, that went through its exercise and fun and day. I still have a pending lawsuit. I don't know if they're withdrawing that or not. We're close to their Phase 2 grading permit that was out there and under review. We're close to finalizing that, if we haven't already. But the denial of the PD that's when they were trying to modify to the access onto Aristide Island. So they've, at this point, my understanding, have abandoned all of that access. They're gonna go through Y'all Road. They're going back to their original approved plan and trying to get their grading permit for the whole site done. I talked to Matt probably about 2 or 3 weeks ago regarding that, because that was the outstanding issues of combining the two phases and doing, stormwater management for the one thing, and that's the last I had heard about that one. But, so that's, again, imminent. The lots are recorded, the plan's been approved. It was just going, it went through all the tolling and all that stuff, and they actually had building permits in here, so there was a lot of vesting done on that project. So it's still alive. The grading permits, imminent from getting approved for that site.
I understand that there might be a new owner of that property. That won't affect any of the permits, right?
I'm sorry?
I hear that there's going to be a new owner of that property.
Mhm.
That's not going to affect any of the permits that have already been granted, though. Or any of the other
No,
processes.
they're gonna come
Alright.
back in and redo all the permits. The permits for the buildings, the homes themselves, they're done. they're only good, like I said, 60 days, and they did get a couple of extensions. I know they did keep them alive, but my understanding is that they're going to come in and reapply for all permits, the new permits.
Because if I recall correctly, the grading permits can't be transferred. I think they'd have to be reapplied for.
Correct. No, grading permits can, it's building permits cannot be. Grading permits can, but it has to have the Director of Public Works blessing, and that they'll, that they'll adhere to all what, it's some language about you've accepted everything that we've approved in that grading permit. So they can be transferred, but it has to have Public Works Director's blessing. I think it's his mine, but I say, well, I'm not doing it without the Director of Public Works. So, SPCA, I don't know what to tell you about that. That's a big project, and it's, there's just a lot of issues with that, because there's RCA, there's the critical area, they got a lot of big plans, and we've had a number of issues of dealing with parking and all that kind of stuff, so we're still working through a lot of the issues with that one. South Annapolis Yacht Center, moving on. Any questions regarding that? The Port Wardens did approve their project there. They were in for a minor modification to their subdivision or site plan to move the lot in accordance with one of the neighbors' requests to move one of the buildings. I'm sorry, and there was an issue with locating that building and the water and sewer line. So we're still working through that minor modification, but they do have an approval for their plan for their site plan. They were just modifying it to appease really one or two of the neighbors. I can't remember if it was Mr. Wass or Mr. Orr. Mr. Orr. So that's sort of where we are with that, because when they did move the building, I think there was a water and sewer line that was going right through the building. A little bit of a problem.
So the lateral line, because we couldn't see during the hearing, did they accept the lateral line as submitted by Bayshore Engineering?
Correct.
Or did,
Yeah.
they did?
They did.
Does the staff
I was
agree
confused with
was-
that too. They referred to Exhibit 1 and 3, and none of us had Exhibit 1 and 3 in front of us.
Right.
So, yeah, they did, but my understanding, and I asked the same question you did, what does that mean when they said they accepted Exhibit 1 and 3, and that was accepting what Bay Engineering had done as determining what the lateral line was.
So did the staff agree that Bayshore Engineering's lateral line was correctly calculated?
Well, I know there was other questions involved, and what I clearly indicated, asked Kevin to clearly indicate, was that we reviewed the exhibits in accordance with Title 15 and stated that that's how it would been done. Now, I qualify that statement because there's still issues about ownership, and there's still issues about that question of riparian rights. Who has what in terms of riparian rights? But in terms of how you do lateral lines, we agreed that that is the methodology that's prescribed by Title 15.
Okay, so this is the purview of this committee, Mr. Chair, as Title 15, and Kevin Scott has advised that there is a lot of cleanup that needs to be done with that title. I think that the lateral line was not correctly calculated, and I think the part of the code that was being used was when you have a cove and they don't have a cove, but I have a feeling this will be taken up in court, but in the meantime, I do think I would appreciate if Kevin would give this committee a laundry list of things that he thinks we ought to be looking at for fixing
We're
the
working on
code.
that. Tom Andrews has given us that directive. We're working with the Harbour Master as well, and Sean Wampler. As you know, we've talked about I've put together a couple of different ideas. We've kind of modified that, of the direction we're going, but we're working on that as we speak. The whole title, we're really only responsible for 2 sections that deal with Port Wardens. The rest of it's really Beth in dealing with the Harbour Master, but they do intertwine. So we're working on that as we speak. So,
Okay. And don't forget to come back to Finance Committee for the budget you need,
yeah.
or the staff,
Right.
whatever it is, but
Alderman Tierney?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just for my own education, Ross, from the Alderman Arnett, the Port Wardens meeting, I thought that they did not specifically address the lateral lines in
Oh,
their
yeah.
decision? I thought they did not, so they did?
Yep, they approved it.
Really?
They gave some other directives in terms of the,
What they did was they said they get to keep, they don't get to do what they plan to do, they get to keep what they have, and they can only replace in kind. So they kept the 9 that were parallel to that bulkhead, not the 5 that were at an angle.
Not in verbalizing that, or is it a piece of paper that they just didn't call
That's
attention
basi-
to? Wow,
They verbalized all
They
of
did?
that. I mean,
wow,
it
I
went-
I left.
it's a little
thinking-
confusing because it went
yeah.
back and around and all over the place. And I was a little confused with the lateral lines too, what they were doing, because there was a lot of questions on the lateral lines. And I thought they were, I didn't think they were going to agree. I mean, again, staff reviewed it as to Title 15. All those other issues we weren't addressing, so
yeah.
that was the confusing part. So, I don't know, Starbucks, that should be under construction, I think it is. That's been moving forward. St. Mary's, I don't know what to tell you about St. Mary's, that proposal is over a year old, and they just haven't moved forward. Don't know what the issues were. HPC approved it, and it's been sitting for a while. Terrapin Station is another one that's just been sitting there. It's only a 6-unit subdivision, but it's been sitting pending revisions for longer. It says May of 17, but it's been longer than that. That's probably the last time we actually looked at anything. Timothy Gardens is moving forward. Town Courts, 2010 West Street, that's right in front of the Capitol building. They're the ones applying for tax credits to do affordable workforce housing. Couple of issues with that. They're in a closed school district, but the Monarch Academy supposedly has relieved the situation there pending new legislation. But I haven't gotten the numbers from the school board, and per code, I can't change the projections until the school board changes their, or I get something from the superintendent or his designee to change that. So we're awaiting that. And then there's some issues of road ownership on Gibraltar that needs to be ironed out. But that project is trying to keep moving forward in order to meet their timelines associated with their tax credits that they're getting. Tyler Heights, that was the one, that was our first prototype for going through 03517. They did have their community meeting. Things are progressing. That was progressing as a normal just site plan and plan a building permit, but we backtracked and had them do the community input meeting, and that's hopefully moving forward. They're under a certain construction timeline too. Village of Providence Point's moving on. No, just kidding. As you can see, there's a number of outstanding issues, things that are incomplete with that plan. We're awaiting revisions. Actually, we did receive some revisions, and I don't think staff started going through some of those revisions. We have been in conversations with their representatives about a different process, and because this is a couple of things going on here, Planning Commission and special exception. One of the bigger issues along with that is that they're also asking for a variance for setbacks, and since they're subdividing the property, how do I justify you're the one subdividing the property, how do I justify a variance or to the setback? So we're in continual conversations about that and looking at different ways to solve some of their problems.
And so they submitted a new forest conservation plan, correct?
Yes.
And I know there's like a 30 or 45-day, I think, limit with possible extension to review that.
Right.
How are you handling that?
I think Tom told them that it was incomplete.
That
So
was what?
we did respond back to them, and it was incomplete. He didn't have all the information.
Oh, okay.
So now it's back on them. The clock for 45 days is gone. We determined within that time frame that the application was incomplete.
Alderman Tierney?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Gutwald, is this an Excel spreadsheet?
It is.
So I was just curious, I know you can't do it now, but it'd be interesting to see what the column units, net new units, would add up to as far as net new units of housing.
We can do that. That's actually on the website. This, this is kind of funny because this is a truncated of the spread. This is a truncation of the spreadsheet because we also track MPDUs on this sheet, traffic studies, all those kinds of. We track a couple of different things. Dr. Nash does, and then she does also for APF schools. We track because the certificate of adequacy has to take into consideration all the developments and the projected number of students that would come out of the ones that are approved. So that is actually, that part of it under APF schools is there, so you could probably, I think that has total number of units citywide in there, but certainly, yeah, we can modify that. I think that's pretty much an update. If there's, I know I'm not going through every single one, but if you have questions, I'm sure to
Any other
answer.
questions?
No, but again, I want to thank you. This is very helpful, and appreciate you taking the time to review it. I think we actually thanked Frank Biba initially for developing this, and then you taking it over, and I think it is a very, very helpful for us. And I do go to the online to look at it every once in a while, but most often I wait for your update.
No problem.
Yeah, thank you, Director.
Sure.
Mr. Regal?
Before Pete goes, we have Kurt Regal, 307 Monterey Avenue in Annapolis.
Is it on?
If it could be a brief comment or question so we can finish
Very
our
brief.
agenda.
A loose end on 39 Hudson. The Severn River Commission chairman had sent a letter to Planning and Zoning raising a concern over whether the new generation from the development, new grading and so forth, would impact the county's restoration project. And we were unaware that any action had been taken on the letter, so I just wanted to ask whether you have worked with the county to make sure that this development at 39 Hudson will not impact the restoration project, which has just begun downstream of there.
I'm not aware of what that, so I'm sure Tom's aware of it, so I'll double backtrack with that.
You have a letter.
Sure.
Well, thank you. I'd like to call Ms. Butler forward with the Environmental Commission because Director Broadbent has graciously allowed you to go first. Thanks, Pete. She reminded me that she's going to be coming to all these meetings. So, and Director Broadbent, looking at the time, I'll sort of play it by ear. I'm not sure if we'll necessarily get to everything with you. But thank you.
Yeah, well,
That works for
you.
me.
Okay.
It's fine.
Thank you for your flexibility.
Thanks, and we are usually last, and we know we get cut out, so I appreciate putting us somewhere in the middle here. And I will, before I jump into the AEC's priorities for 2018, I just want to address a couple of things that were discussed a few seconds ago, including the dog park issue and the idea of trying to look for places, open space places and conservation areas that might be useful for things like dog parks. So right
Ms.
behind...
Butler, sorry to interrupt. Can you state your name for the record?
Oh, sure. Diane Butler, Chairwoman of the Annapolis Environmental Commission. And the reason I want to talk about the dog park issue is that we are very interested in possibly looking at the space behind the post office, which is an area called Post Office Park, and we thought the city owned it. And we were trying to hardscape it or landscape it to increase catching runoff into Back Creek. And we found out during that process that we might not own all of it. And so we've had a request into the city for well over a year now to try to figure out ownership of that. And this would be a great time to, as we're going through the inventory of different properties that the city owns, and as Ross Arnett was talking about, what are street end parks that we need to protect. If we could look at that particular parcel and lock it down for us, that would be great. I also wanted to talk about, I had a list of notes that I wanted to,
Okay, well, I can't find the other things, but we are working with Mount Olive to secure some of the 30 to 35 jobs that are going to be paid internships for green jobs for kids, or not kids, young adults, 18 to 25 years old. And the AEC is going to be working with Mr. Calhoun, Reverend Calhoun, on that project. We're really excited about that project. And it's actually being sponsored by the Chesapeake Conservation Corps, and Chesapeake Bay Trust is putting the money up towards that. I think that'll be a great opportunity to bring some diversity into the environmental world and create green jobs, so we're excited about doing that. The
What types of jobs are they?
Well, there'll be
What were they doing?
jobs in green infrastructure, everything from, basically trying to maintain some of the rain gardens and BMPs that are being created around the city. So it'll dovetail really nicely with some of the ideas we have on our priority list and what the Annapolis Conservancy Board is talking about doing in terms of connecting open space and some of these smaller parks. You talked a little bit about the idea of having water access, and a couple of the projects that are under review now still pose a great opportunity for us to do that. One of them is Chesapeake Grove on Bemby Beach Road, and I think maybe before it gets too far down the line, it sounds like it's pretty far down the line right now, but we might be able to readdress that issue of water access there. How? Yeah. So there's the, right across the street from the entrance to where Bemby or Chesapeake Grove will be, is the Ellen Moyer Nature Preserve or Park, and that has parking right there. So if there are folks that want to come and access.
No, I mean, because I was tangentially involved with that. I heard a lot of resistance from the developer to making access.
Sure, but all the developers do. They get approval based on their promise to do this stuff, and then they don't do it. The city has the authority and leverage to do it. So now that we have a new administration, we are very excited because it's one of the priorities of this mayor to make sure we don't not only lose ground, which we are in Eastport, as you know, but we're going to create new opportunities in areas of the city where maybe public access has been, not really focused on in the past. We can make that happen. So I would like to figure out if there's anything the Environmental Matters Committee can do to get that dialogue going immediately, and I'd be happy to sit down and talk about what we could do to
Can you
support
submit something in writing to the chair?
Sure.
We raise all these things, and they're good ideas, and then they get forgotten. And I think this is an opportunity with the new mayor.
Sure.
Because that is a wonderful place for access, and I don't think we're going to get it.
Well, we can. Don't give up yet. We have the parking, we have the infrastructure, and we haven't signed off on the project. So this is the time if we're going to do anything.
There are a couple of ways to do it. I mean, the annexation agreement, I'm not so sure if that's even valid anymore.
Oh.
I have to look at the date about when it was adopted and if all the conditions have been met. So there might be an opportunity to revisit that. Also, the Planning Commission has leeway to require public access if they so desire.
Well, this is your ward.
It is, it's on, yeah, so I need to
a-
get on this.
Yeah, it's a lovely opportunity, and at my town hall meeting when we were talking about water access, that really does strike a chord with people. We're here because of the water, and yet we can't most often get near it unless you pay a few $1,000s a year for a slip. So we really do have to work on this.
I had some kids who tried to access the water in my ward, but the police called on them.
Yeah.
Because it's difficult to do. So I would definitely want to do whatever I can to help facilitate that. And like I said, the annexation agreement says they're supposed to explore access, and I'd like to see actually evidence that they have explored this, because I don't think it'd be too strenuous for them to incorporate to some degree.
One of the things we're going to ask, as a city, is for the developers to provide benefits to us. So in exchange for letting them do, some of the, take away some of our natural assets, being trees, we should ask for things like public access to water when we can. So thank you for your support on that. I will put something in writing proposing that. I also wanted to mention in Eastport, we are losing water access. Right now, or until recently, we were able to access on the Eastport side, Spot Creek, where Annapolis Yacht Club is building the annex, well, where there's a family center and sailing center. And I understand when that is finished, there will be no more access to the water unless you belong to that yacht club. So that's a fair amount of waterfront access going away for some of us. And then also South Annapolis Yacht Center, while publicly they continue to say that they're going to allow public access to the water, they refuse to put it in writing. And my guess is, or my fear is, I should say, that once the $1 million houses are built, they can easily, close off, put a gated community in and say, sorry, you're not coming into our property anymore. So again, that's pretty far down the line, but they haven't, started building, and I think it's another area where if they're promising to do it in order to get, or they did in order to get approvals along the way, we should hold them to it and at least have a tiny little easement that allows people from that neighborhood who support the project to access the water. So I'll also.
Alderman Tierney?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's a big deal and very important if we can somehow get that in the developer impact fees. What is the procedure on doing that? You've suggested getting, like such as water, or are they sort of different for each project? I mean, right now the impact fees go to what, schools and roads?
So I'm not sure exactly how the impact fees work, other than I don't think they pay an impact fee for taking away our water rights or access to the water. There's no such separate, little checkbox for that. But if Mr. Gutwald is here, he might be able to address that, or Ross, or.
You actually have some lawyers available. I'm wondering if we could put water access in Title 22. If we could.
I'd like to see that underneath the medical
Mm-hmm.
facility.
Right. So we'll, again, help us with cards and letters, really emails, but when you tweak us, then we can bring it up. But we can put it on the agenda for another, and that would be Title 22 would be rules and city government, but maybe the two committees could work together on that. But I really do think it does have to do with adequacy. Maybe a stretch. We may need some legal minds to help us, but it would be a good thing to think about.
No, it's a great thing to think about. We're happy to pursue this, and it shouldn't be that you have to belong to a yacht club in order to access water. That's just not the way it should be in our city. Luckily, in Eastport, we do have other street-end parks, so we're very fortunate, but not everyone is close to those street-end parks, so the rest of the city should have access, and so we will definitely pursue that. The lateral line issue, Alderman Arnett, you're exactly right. The Code 15 talks about lateral lines on a cove, although it doesn't say that in the subsection, so people are applying it in various ways at different times. So our city has approved several projects where the lateral lines go straight out from the property as late as we reviewed some files from 2004 to 2014. So they're doing it one way, and when it's convenient for them to do it the other way, they've done it the other way. And our city has approved it both ways. So that inconsistency is a problem, and was a real problem for the neighbors of Newport condominium just recently when the port wardens reviewed it and weren't correctly instructed on the law, we believe. So we think that could be clarified, and appreciate Alderman Arnett, your offer to try to straighten out that law and make sure that our planning and zoning department staff get that right, because getting it wrong on Spot Creek, and Alderman Tierney is impacted by this too, will have a very detrimental effect on the city, and off Spot Creek, Back Creek, College Creek, all of our creeks. So it's lateral lines as it pertains to cove versus properties that don't have a spherical or concave type waterfront. It needs to be clarified. And then,
Just, Mr. Chair, we also under Title 15, I would remind, have purview over the harbor lines, and that's a work in progress right now. So we will be getting the proposed harbor line corrections, which is a two-part process. They have a photograph from February, which they have now imposed GIS locus points for all the pilings and so forth. And then the planning staff are going to be recommending some alterations to that harbor line in the interest of navigation and other things. And that'll have to come to us for approval. It is one of the many, many things that the planning department is juggling, and they don't have the staff or the money to do that. But this is a really important thing. I know Tecumseh, where I keep my boat, their harbor line is incorrect, and they wanted to redo their marina. They put it off, but that's going to have a big impact, and it'll keep us busy.
Yeah, I'd be happy to put that on a future agenda. And Ms. Butler, just to make you aware, we have about 20 minutes.
Okay, I'll stop. So running through our priorities, I'm just going to touch on a few highlights because Kate and Paul want to talk on about or touch on a few as well. So our priorities are broken into near-term and long-term, and some of the near-term ones, which we're very excited to talk about, but not at great length, are number one, the no discharge zone. We don't want to say too much about this one right now. It's at the top of our list for a reason. We just like to say that the mayor supports it, and we hope to be saying more about it in the near future. Updating the 2004 City of Annapolis Parks and Rec open space plan. We want to also incorporate basically a master greenway plan into that. So the county has a master greenway plan. We need a city master greenway plan. And Kate and I met with the head of Parks and Rec, Rick Anthony, sorry, and we talked about how it's a good time to update the 2004 Parks and Rec manual and to go ahead and try to make those connections that we're talking about between these pocket parks, real parks, conservation easements. And so we're going to work with the Conservation Board to do that. And the third one I'm going to mention is just the Forest Conservation Act. We did a great job last time in strengthening it. I think we, going forward, would like to take it a step further and remove the credit, the reforestation credit, which keeps it from really being a true no net loss ordinance. So we're going to propose that happen in 2018 and hope that we have your support. We can go into a lot more detail and answer questions on that, but since we're running out of time, I'm going to just hand over the speaker to Kate. There's the microphone.
Here today.
Can you state your name and...
Yeah. Oh, sure.
for the
I'm
record?
Kate Bohannon. I'm the Vice Chair of the Annapolis Environmental Commission and a resident of Ward 7. I want to briefly mention two of the items on our near-term priority list. I'm on items 5 and 7 related to the stormwater utility fee. These items we're specifically hoping that the city could clarify some of the uses and the implementation of the stormwater credit program. So number 5, clarifying the uses of the fund. When the stormwater fee is collected, it's really intended as a dedicated funding source for new projects. And it's been brought to our attention through various AEC meetings that at times it's used more for operations and existing projects. And our commission would like to see that go towards bonus additional stormwater management practices above and beyond what's required. So we understand from Department of Environmental Policy that there's a shortfall in the amount of funding they have to do the maintenance, which is why we're in this situation. So we would ask that you consider the maintenance budget for the existing projects so we can truly use the stormwater utility fee for its intended purpose.
So, Mr. Chair, this came up, and really the committee you want to be coming to is Finance Committee. But I raised it at our meeting yesterday. We really do need to create this as a revolving fund. It gets two different kinds of monies. It gets monies for the stormwater fee, but it also, under the last administration, got money from the capital budget. You're right, they're not properly segmented, and you're also right in my view, they don't have enough money. So we'll not meet our TMDL goals for 2025. The last administration resisted properly funding that, in my view. The issue that came up at finance yesterday was they were charging 34,000 some odd dollars to the fee to do a stormwater management fee study, which is part of a broader study that we do to set the water and sewer rates. But the charge to the fee for the to the fund for the stormwater was over 3 times as big as the one for setting water and sewer. The explanation I got was because it's the first time that the study's been done, so there's more work. This is an annual study. But I personally believe that the fee needs to be increased by orders of magnitude. But please send something to me or to the finance committee, but also send it to the mayor. He's new and susceptible to suggestions, so get those things in there.
Mr. Chairman, there was an element that I'm not sure that Kate got to yet, but it involved having us put together an annual reporting of how that fund is used, so that you can see how those funds are using it, and that might help to also make everybody understand the whole enterprise fund concept. What we're spending on the stormwater effort and whether or not it's coming from the fee or not.
Right.
I personally have been trying to get that since 2009.
Right.
Well, yeah, we've seen some, thank you, all of you, and for Ms. Bohannon for staying on top of this issue, because as Ms. Butler alluded to, we've been trying for a while to get this information, and some of the earlier versions, reports I've seen, it seemed to indicate that previous administrations used this fund to help balance the budget. That was stopped underneath late in the Cohen administration, I believe. But now it's all being spent on staff, like you said, and I think that wasn't the intention. I think a portion of the money can and needs to get spent on that, but not all of it, for sure. So,
the reason I wanted to,
as I believe Director Broadbent had said, the budget for the city is 0 for maintenance.
Yeah, it's 0
of
for
these
maintenance.
structures.
I think where the issue with the fees sort of fell short in the last budget process was there were 2 big initiatives. One was $1 million for new capital projects, and that is not connected to the stormwater fee or fund at all. It's just CIP,
right,
separate. And then the stormwater fee was increased by half. And we have, as some of you know, because I keep talking about it all the time, 6 minimum measures in our permit, in addition to capital construction process things, but we have not had the funding to do the 6 minimum measures in our permit requirements, and some of that increase from the fee was supposed to go towards that. And then at the last minute, the ordinance got changed that indicated all of the new, I think Alderman Littman made that move, and he got a lot of pressure from the community to change that. So now what I end up with is permit requirements that I have no funding to meet the requirements of the permit with the EPA. So it's great to have capital funding, but we have maintenance and operation costs. And where you go forward and look at what the true cost of the stormwater effort is, it's certainly always been my hope that some of that accounting is attributed to how impervious one's property is.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Director Broadbent, and I think we'll definitely need probably our own dedicated meeting on stormwater issues at some point.
That's right.
Alderwoman Tierney?
Very quickly, I'm going to take advantage of my colleague Alderman Arnett being here in the Finance Committee. I can't stress the importance enough of making sure we have an allocation when we review the capital budget, that we have an allocation for respective maintenance. I mean, maintenance is an expense. Sometimes it's such an expense that it turns into a capital item, and they morph into that. So we can't just pick and choose what we want maintenance on. Capital investment is an asset, and the maintenance is a cost. So they both have to be weighed hand in hand. So I've spoken my piece.
And that's exactly right. I mean, if if you use light bulbs for an example, if you don't replace a certain number of light bulbs over the course of many years, when you have to replace them all at once, now you got a capital project when it really was just light bulbs.
And
So-
that's why I want it to be a revolving fund, because there's not gonna be huge expenses up front, but then when we finally get all of the watershed improvement plan going at once, there'll be a lot of demand. And that's where I thought that the last administration was very short-sighted.
And I thought the intention was to have the fee be a revolving fund.
Yes, I think that was the intention.
Supposed to-
And an enterprise,
Yeah, so.
and an enterprise.
it's
So
more
it's,
work,
it's
but-
full cost accounting for all the issues related to stormwater, all
Right.
together, capital
yeah.
and operating.
And related to all of that is the fact that we can increase the amount of stormwater that the developers currently treat from 50 to 100% when they're doing redevelopment projects, and that will help us greatly. Again, it would be a benefit to us, and we hope that will start happening. We actually have the code section to do that right now, and we haven't been doing that as a city policy-wise, and I think in the last administration there was a push to start doing it, but as far as we know, the people who are actually applying this law at the ground level, so to speak, are still saying they aren't asking the developers to do more than 50% if it's redevelopment, because they don't feel they're getting support from their supervisors and, let's just say, up the chain. So we're not sure exactly how to do this, but we really would like to present the fact that we could be saving the city a lot of money in stormwater runoff requirements or treatment if we can just enforce the law more strictly than we are now.
Yeah, that'll definitely, it's gonna be a key part to allowing us to meet our targets. Ms. Bohannon.
So, final thing on stormwater is that we have another way that you could potentially increase the amount in this. Okay, that you get in the stormwater utility fee bucket. That's by ensuring that you're not granting credits through the city's stormwater credit program to practices that are already required by law. We are commissioned and feel strongly that the credits should go towards those who are going above and beyond, not those who are just meeting really what's required. So again, we could get into that in more detail later, and we look forward to
Well, so
working with you on
do you
that.
understand that part of it? Because I read that, and I'll need help unless you.
Yeah, we can talk
Okay,
more about it.
right.
Mr. Murphy, thank you. We have about a little over 5 minutes, so, but
Paul Murphy, Ward 2, just finishing up on, this is an ongoing process, but 2 items, particularly one that's coming, it's small, but coming front and center. For those of you know, I've been watching this C-bin project, the trash can, and, it's good for them being clever and inventing it. It's been a couple of years, but they've been bought by a larger company. They're being produced now. Larger company got it to fruition, but they also want to make a little money, so the price is higher, not a huge deal.
Mr. Murphy, can you describe for everybody what a C-bin is?
Bin, as in trash can, C as in the ocean. So it's basically a trash can with a waterproof electric motor that sits at the bottom, and 24/7 it sits at water level, skimming all the junk off the surface like you would sip the foam off your hot cocoa. And in most of the town, it should be private sector who buys these to clean their yacht club, their marina, their housing project. Most of it is, as you know, privately owned. Well, one area that's front and center is city dock, and I think that's clearly a city responsibility, and also happens to be a cornerstone and notable, and much of the summer it's an embarrassment how filthy it is down there. So the C-bin is coming soon. They're going to be about $4,500. We and Annapolis Green are going to work to sell through the community as I spoke, but getting the city to put one in first, particularly City Dock, is going to catch a lot of eyeballs. So I would like to have the C-bin at $4,500 approved, and it'd be great to have one in this summer. That's my biggest, most pressing timeline, and then I have a secondary one.
So again, and I can't emphasize this enough, I would send everything to all of the elected officials, not just to this committee, but that'll be something that'll have to be considered once. It'd be nice if it was in the mayor's budget, but if not, it'll have to be considered by the finance committee as an enhancement. Enhancement is a dirty word for trade-offs. If you get 45 for this, then you got to find 45 someplace else because the amount of revenue is pretty much capped. So, but again, it doesn't bother me. I might not get to it the day you send it, but I think, and particularly with a new council, I think making people aware, you can't assume that there's carryover of all that knowledge. So, and I'd be explicit about that particular program because it's a no-brainer once you understand what it is.
Well, I think it is a very clever and effective idea. Also, the C-bin can suck up about a kilo and a half a day, so 20 pounds a week. You know, summertime is going to do more in February, there's not much trash, but a single C-bin can plausibly remove 700 to 1,000 pounds of surface pollution a year. Now, the cellophane, the cigarette butts, the styrofoam cups are not TMDL eligible, but there is, you know, it's going to catch a lot of stuff, so I'm not saying every, you know, the C-bin might pull 700,000 pounds out. Not every pound of that is going to be TMDL eligible, but a portion of it will be, so, you know, let alone making the water cleaner and
Well, I'm wondering if it's a relatively, you know, minuscule amount of money. I'm wondering if we can maybe get it out of the stormwater fee somehow. I know all that's probably allocated for operating money, but it might be worthwhile to look into.
There's a couple of business owners who would be happy to pay the money to put their name on it if you want to go that way.
Yeah, that's another approach
So if
too.
you want stadium naming rights, you can go that way.
There's probably several options. There's actually a unit that's meant for commercial use that the Harbour Master in Newport is using that can handle much more of a city dock area. C-bin would be great for smaller marina owners that, you know, are really only looking for needing something the size of a trash can. But there are units that are much larger that can handle all of the stuff that's coming down through the pipes from Main Street.
We could put one by the mayor's houseboat.
Yeah, well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Speaking of the mayor, what I'm reading here was designed by an Australian engineer.
Even worse, a Western Australian.
Yeah.
You got a plug there, and it's a great little stick figure diagram here. I can understand it.
The second one, just to squeeze this in very quickly, and I have not fleshed this out as much, but for those very knowledgeable on the Environmental Commission, the leaves, you know, too many leaves in the creek is not good. What we have now is this big street sweeper, which I call the Zamboni, and it goes down the center of the street and pushes the leaves to the curb. So you're getting some credit for the mileage you're logged, but all you're doing is some of the leaves are sucked up, many are in the curbs. So we can either tell people to get up in their pajamas and move their parking spot, which in Eastport you have some room, but city historic area, I don't think you guys want to be the ones known for bringing that change in. So trying to come up with a different idea. And the city used to be in the leaf removal business a decade ago, and rightfully they got out of it, or cost-wise. So there are smaller, less than $2,000 units that are still, you pull them along, but there's a little motor that makes it easy. You don't have to lug the thing up, you know, the incline. But it's a vacuum, and it's got a 75-gallon bag, so it limits its capacity. You might have to fill it up a couple times a day. I'm not saying the entire city should be done this way, but you get down in the tight little parking and spaces down here, this vacuum could get around the curbs, could get around the cars, suck up many more leaves, other clumps, and maybe you start with one for under $2,000. They're sold locally. There's a number of manufacturers and there's several dealers in town, and that might be a better way to be removing leaves than having a larger, more expensive, much more expensive maintenance-wise Zamboni, whatever you want, street sweeper going down narrow streets.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. And
I have a quick question before we, conclude, and it really is a question, is there any way that you can have planning and zoning do what they used to do and sort of give us the highlights for the projects that impact the Forest Conservation Act? So in other words, we used to get a report from Frank Biba that would say, here's the Forest Conservation Plan, here's how many trees it's proposing to take down in this particular project, and we can figure out the rest, what the net loss is, because we've just been looking at the Forest Conservation Act on a couple of projects, and we're looking at a lot of tree loss in the upcoming, next few years.
That's online though, Diane.
It's really, no, you can't, so
Well, I
the
think
Forest
she's
Conservation
asking
Plan
for,
is,
I think, where you can actually see the total forest that
Yeah.
is proposed to be cleared. I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah.
To see if we can get a little more detail. Because I think they have to keep track of that anyway.
Right.
To be compliant with the Forest Conservation Act. So I could talk to Pete and see what we
I
can
think
do.
it's in the sub-detail of the spreadsheet.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll talk to Pete, see if it's there. in
okay,
some
that would be
fashion.
terrific, because for us, it's really hard. Online, you have to open up an enormous document, and then you have to drill down to the Forest Conservation Plan, and the Forest Conservation Plan is usually embedded on a sheet that is, you have to figure out how you can cut and paste a PDF out of that form into another format. It's really hard to do. So right now, we were just looking at some of the projects you were talking about, including Rocky Gorge, where I didn't realize that Phase 2 was just going forward. They're talking about taking down more trees. We haven't been part of the process whatsoever
Ms.
since
Butler.
we didn't.
Sorry, I want to interrupt because we're running out
Sure.
of time.
Okay.
But can you just give a quick
Uh-huh.
summary of the role you see the Environmental Commission providing?
Oh, we'd like to support the city and its environmental goals. I would like to support planning and zoning and DPW, OEP. We just want to be a support mechanism, while obviously we're not shy about giving our own ideas on what the city can do better. But really, we just want to support all the environmental initiatives that are ongoing. And is that what you would?
Yes.
Pretty much.
Well, thank you very much for
Sure.
your service and for coming here today and providing the report. I'm sorry it feels abbreviated, but I hope you got at least some more time than you had previously.
Yes, we did. This makes up
But
for a lot.
also, thank Director Brother for yielding
Thank
her
you.
position tonight, this afternoon. And again, thank you, and I apologize, but we're not going to be able to get to you today. But at least this gives us time to review what you submitted and talk more about it next. And I think after this, I'm still learning how much time things are going to need, and I think your report's probably going to need more time anyway, so.
And we usually are, because, this is what we do. We could
Yeah.
take up your whole meeting. We will be sending something to you that talks a little bit about our review under the STAR program. So this is the whole binder of this, and Racine, raise your hand, Racine. We're work to get everybody's information for our certification for this, but it has 8 whole categories. So what we're going to do is send you the spreadsheets that has which points we've earned and which points are available that we didn't earn, and ask that maybe each time you meet that we go over one of the sections so you can see some of the sustainability programs that you as an administration might want to consider over the next 4 years.
Do we have this in electronic form?
You do, it should be,
I
Tuki
can-
attached it to your agenda, but
Okay.
just
can forward it to
before
you
the
as well.
meeting today.
Okay.
Before we end, are there any very brief comments from the general public? Okay, anything
was
from the
very
colleagues? Yeah. Anything else from my colleagues?
Good meeting.
All right, I'd like
thank you.
to entertain a motion to
So moved.
adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I don't know if you had to second that or not.